Call of Duty is a globe-trotting franchise, letting you take part in battles all over the world. From modern-day maps in Iraq or Afghanistan, to storming the beaches of Normandy, to braving the icy Siberian tundra, or sometimes even leaving this world, taking us to places like the International Space Station. But occasionally, COD tries to reel it in a bit and bring the fight back to home, back to the good old US of A. And that's because, as a country, we have such a wide and diverse range of settings. There's everything from old, untouched countryside to massive cities, and just about every last corner of the nation has been featured across at least one Call of Duty or another. So today, we'll be trying to visit each and every state without leaving the safety of my favorite franchise. And at the end, we'll count up how many states are represented and which have yet to be immortalized in the series. Let's dive in. Starting off here in alphabetical order, we have Alabama. There's none. Sorry, Alabama. But next up is Alaska, which actually has a few maps in Black Ops 7 named Scar and Homestead, the latter of which takes place at Alex Mason's home in Fairbanks. That's right, Alaska is actually decently important to the game's story, as it's Mason's home state and where we saw a bit of David growing up. As far as released multiplayer maps though, we actually have one other Alaskan map, which is Whiteout from Call of Duty Ghosts. This map was a massive snowy map, no shocker there that it was massive, that most people forgot about, and those who remember wish they forgot. It was absolutely massive and weirdly laid out, with a crashed ship on one end and a quaint fishing town on the other, and a lodge over on the third side, all connected by caves and other narrow passages to sprint through while desperately looking for any kind of action at all. It does look pretty. I'll give it that. And then we're gonna hop on a quick 6-hour flight to Arizona, which is featured on possibly the most memorable Modern Warfare 2 map, Santa Border Crossing. Now this map, for better or for worse, is this game's legacy, dropping you on the border of the US and Mexico. And because of that, a lot of people initially assumed that this meant the US side would be Texas. But actually, according to the police cars and license plates, it's actually Arizona. There's really not much to say here. It's another pretty terrible map that's insanely long, leading to a really weird flow, and for the first few months of the game's release, a single grenade would detonate all the cars at once. It wasn't fun, and I'm still thinking it was a troll, I hope. Now next up is California, and there's actually dozens of maps that call this state home over the course of the series. There's Grind, Skid Row, Bayview, Chasm, Lockup, Convoy, Chinatown, Redwood, Defender, Grow House, Meat, Black Box, and even 2 different shipments. But the one that we're really gonna go with is the classic from Black Ops 2, Aftermath. This takes place in a destroyed Los Angeles after the events of the single-player campaign. And I hate to say it, but so far we're 0 for 3 in terms of good multiplayer maps. Now what I remember most about Aftermath was just poor visibility. On the surface, the map doesn't look bad, but enemies tend to all blend in the background here, and that can get really frustrating really fast. And overall, this is one BO2 map that I doubt we're ever gonna see make a return. But far from there, let's move on to Colorado, which is featured on a single Advanced Warfare map, Drift. This was another mostly forgettable one, just because of when it dropped as part of a DLC for a game that didn't really hold a ton of players after launch. It was a snow-covered ski resort, which matches what most people think of when they think of Colorado. Now, Advanced Warfare was during that era of COD where they were really trying to push the envelope with this dynamic map element. So on Drift, they added an avalanche that could be triggered covering parts of the map, plus a carousel that actually spins, something that, believe it or not, will appear again in a few minutes. Sunny Florida is up next, and obviously for that, we're gonna have to go with Miami from Black Ops Cold War. And what's interesting is that this map is actually decently accurate to a real-life street in the real city, even matching the street signs in businesses like the hotel. All that said though, the devs made a fatal mistake when designing this map. They put the coast off the north side. Now, I'm not a genius or anything, but I'm pretty sure Florida doesn't have a northern coast. As for this map spot in COD history, I think most people remember it just because it was in the game's beta, and it was one of only like 8 maps available at launch. Reception-wise, most people didn't like its size and how dark it was, leading them to releasing a separate Strike version a few months later that took place during the day and shrunk the playable space down to about half. And moving just off the northern coast from there and into Georgia, we actually only have a single map, but it's one of the greats. Rush. This BO2 map became an instant classic as a part of the DLC season, eventually coming back in Black Ops Cold War. It's set in a paintball arena that's the perfect size for COD. Not too big and not too small, offering fun close quarters fights, and overall, it's just a classic. And now for the exact opposite of classic, Hawaii is up next with a map that's incredibly unique, but doesn't get talked about too much anymore, and that's Recovery. Now, if you don't remember this map, I don't really blame you, but it was set in a volcanic observatory on the Hawaiian island of Oahu. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce it. I didn't look it up. I'm sorry. And what made this map special was that partway through the match, the volcano would erupt and it would force everyone into a second completely separate playable space. It seemed like it was Call of Duty's response to Battlefield's crazy Levolution maps, but ultimately people didn't really love it. But hey, at least it was better than Ghosts letting you shoot down a tree or whatever they were trying to do. Now on to Illinois, we are gonna go with Modern Warfare 22's Penthouse, taking place in a luxury apartment in Chicago. Now this is another one based loosely off one of the game's final campaign missions, and it's a small face-off map, and it was pretty late in the DLC season, so it's not high on many people's list, but it's a pretty cool looking map nonetheless. Next up is Kansas, and for this one, we're gonna go with the map Vortex. Now, technically, there's nothing directly saying we're in Kansas here, but the general vibe mixed with the tornado billowing in the distance puts it somewhere in Tornado Alley in the center of the country. So we're gonna call it Kansas for the sake of it, and there's nothing you can do about it. And now for Kentucky, where up until a few weeks ago, COD had yet to cover, but with the launch of the BO6 Season 6, we got 2 maps both taking place there, Mothball and Gravity, both taking place in the facility from the Emergence mission in the campaign, aka the one where you fight zombies. Mothball is a standard face-off map, and like so many other Black Ops 6 maps, it's just a tiny, teeny meat grinder, and there's nothing really notable about it. But Gravity actually changes things up with a low gravity chamber that lets you jump around like that Warzone April Fool's mode. It's actually a really creative new map that, to be honest, they probably shouldn't have waited until the game was completely dead to add. And then there's Louisiana, where we're gonna make a stop at Parrish from the original MW3. Yet another DLC map bringing the game to a new state. This one brings us to New Orleans. Now that being said, there really isn't too much as far as iconic scenery to really fit into the city, and instead it's pretty much all destruction and rubble, like a lot of MW3's maps now that I think about it. Now for Maine, this is a weird one, so I'm gonna need y'all to trust me when I say that the pick for this state is MW23's Ghost Ship, aka the demonic version of Shipment that year. And this one's a bit more abstract and has less subtle clues as to where we are, but MW3 in particular is nice enough to start each match with a location tag at the beginning. So that pretty much answers that. Now, Shipment was definitely overdone this year, but man, does this variant actually look really good. The lighting and the overall horror vibe is done so well, and it feels like something we'd see in a zombie survival map. Now for my hometown, Maryland. We have a handful of maps set in and around DC. First, over in Zombies, you of course have 5, which takes place in the Pentagon, letting you play as JFK, Nixon, McNamara, and Castro, descending deeper into the building's sub-levels. And second, of course, is over the MW2 campaign mission of their own accord, where you have to fight off a full-scale invasion of the country, including fighting in and around some of the city's most iconic landmarks. But then, lastly, in multiplayer, we're gonna have to go with the map Gala in BO6. It's an incredibly simple map, being a little more than a big empty room, but it's set in Maryland, so that's it. Let's move on to the next state. Next up is Michigan, with a map taking place in the iconic city of Detroit named Detroit. That one was pretty easy. Let's go next. Now for Nebraska, we're gonna go back to COD Ghosts again, this time with Warhawk. Now Warhawk is actually one of the better maps in this game and honestly should really be remade again sometime soon. Location-wise, Warhawk takes place on a main street of a small Nebraskan town after the fall of the US and Ghost campaign, which might be why you think it's called Warhawk, but it's actually named after the local sports team. Go Warhawks! And now is Nevada. Finally, one with more than just a single map. You got Octane from Ghosts, Hangar 18 from BO1, and Sphere in Vanguard. But by far the most iconic and the one you're probably screaming at me through your phone right now is, of course, Nuketown. As possibly the most famous and iconic COD map of all time, being remade countless times across multiplayer and zombies, there really isn't much more to say. Almost all of them take place in the Nevada desert and actually are based off real-life testing sites that were conducted by the US military around the time of the Cold War. There's a fun fact for you. Leave a like on the video. And speaking of Cold War, for Jersey, we're gonna go with the Pines, which infills you into a retro's 80s mall, complete with a food court, arcade, and a knockoff Circuit City. Man, I miss Circuit City. Now, we know this one's in Jersey because, again, the game outright tells us, and because the mall is based off the Twin Pines Mall from Back to the Future, with a snowy exterior and a brightly lit interior, making it feel cozy in all the different defunct stores inside only added to the nostalgia of it all. And once again, we are going to be sticking with Cold War. This map, Diesel, takes us to New Mexico for the first and only time in the series, where this map drops us off at a roadside pit stop to fight around a gas station and the surrounding trailer park. And to be honest, this was actually one of the better and more underrated small maps in this game, with decent enough flow behind the station while still having some longer ranges and flanking out by the street. And now we're on to New York, which next to California is one of the most common locations for multiplayer maps inside the US. There's High Rise, Detour, Collision, Overwatch, Stadium, Beheaded, Liberation, and the Modern Warfare 23's versions of Das House, and even Skid Row. That's right, they moved Skid Row from California to New York. I don't know why. But the map that's most recognizably New York City, we have Modern Warfare 3's Downturn, taking place in Manhattan during the Russian invasion of the US, featuring both street level and subway level fights through the destroyed city. Unfortunately though, this map is mostly recognizable because of how bad it was. It's just a massive map that was overly bleak and gray, which added some major visibility issues, leading to it being a pretty much hated map. It was a pretty cool concept though. Now, Ohio's map brings us back to the new MW3 again, this time with the map Drive-Thru. Now, this one puts you in a spooky and abandoned fast food restaurant as a part of the Haunting event that year. And what's cool is there's actually all kinds of subtle environmental storytelling all around, leading you to believe that the restaurant may not actually be serving what they say they're serving. Also, here's that second carousel that I promised. Then we're moving on over to South Dakota with the map site 244 from Advanced Warfare. Now, this futuristic map taking place around a crashed spaceship carrying some kind of alien goo isn't super memorable or iconic. In fact, it was a pretty middle-of-the-road DLC map at the time. But how do we know it's set in South Dakota? Well, if you look off just to the side of the map there, you'll see some pretty familiar looking faces. That's right, it takes place right in front of Mount Rushmore. A really odd choice, but you know what? Why not? Now, Texas is a weird one. You'd think for a state so massive and distinct, there'd be a ton of maps set here, but there's really not a lot at all. For our pick, we're going to be going with Tremor from Ghosts, which drops you into the capital city of Austin, Texas, post-war obviously, so everything is destroyed and decaying. What's unique about this map though is that it actually had a map-specific earthquake that would rumble throughout the match and even destroy certain parts of it. It's super subtle, but kind of a cool dynamic map element nonetheless. Then we have Virginia. Now, this is the site of the initial big attack on the US back in the original MW2. You know, where you had to defend Burger Town from an entire freaking army? But over on the multiplayer side of things, we actually only had a single map based around that iconic battle, Bailout. Bailout drops us into an apartment complex just as the invasion begins and is pretty underrated part of the MW2 DLC. Although, to be honest, almost all of MW2's DLC is kind of underrated. We need more maps like Salvage, Storm, and Trailer Park to be remade ASAP. Now on to Washington State, which has two that we'll talk about. First is the old Michael Myers tie-in in the map from COD Ghosts, back when crossovers were fun and not forced. You can fight in and around this horrific cabin in the campsite just off to the side. And if you didn't know, getting your field order done here will earn you an entire Michael Myers kill streak. And it was actually cool. And second is over here in Zombies for the map Transit. Now, unless you're big on the lore, you might not initially notice it's in Washington because the entire Earth was nuked just before you get to play on it. And even then, the majority of the map is covered in a thick fog, but it's definitely Washington nonetheless. And for another twofer, we have West Virginia popping up all over Black Ops 6. First, with the multiplayer maps Derelict and Rewind taking place in a train yard and then a random strip mall in the suburbs, really capitalizing on that 90s nostalgia. But then over in Zombies, half the maps over there actually take place in Liberty Falls, West Virginia. And heck, even the Warzone map next year is going to take place here as well. Clearly, someone high up at Treyarch is from West Virginia. And lastly, we have Wyoming, home to the map Sideshow from Advanced Warfare. Yep, this was that clown motel map which took place on the side of the road in the middle of nowhere. And despite taking place during the day, it's nothing but creepy vibes everywhere. But what's cool is that this map was actually based off of a real-life clown motel. However, the real one was set in Nevada, not Wyoming. Now, I'm not sure why they moved it, but maybe it was just to help us check another state off the list, which I appreciate. And ladies and gentlemen, that is it. That is every single state that we could find a map, a mission, or other kind of reference to in Call of Duty. So let's take a look at the completed map. In the end, we have a total of 26 out of 50 states accounted for, so a little more than half. But now I'll turn the question over to y'all. Did I miss any? If your home state was featured, I'm kind of curious. How accurate was it to real life? I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.